Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a little insight into the production process for my project, Fate Saga. So I just received this awesome background from my awesome background artist, Kennedi Perez, and I'm going to be putting it into some of the shots that are being worked on. So this particular shot, or this particular background, is being used in two shots, shot 22 and shot 30. So I'm going to open up the shots in Harmony and I'm going to pull them in. So when you're incorporating a background into a project, it really depends on the software that you're using. This particular software, oh boy, let's step out of this for a moment. So this particular project is being worked on in a software called Harmony. Now, I have had projects where I incorporate the backgrounds in a different software from Harmony, like After Effects. But this particular project, I'm trying to stay in Harmony as best I can, just to keep things less complicated if there's anything I need to change. So here was the original background, SCO22BG. And this background was originally in 3D, just to use as an like an under layout. And the background was done by an awesome 3D modeler, Newman. And what she does is she sets up the 3D background so that the background artists, like Kennedi, can trace over them, or use, well, it's not a direct trace. As you can see, this 3D background definitely looks a little different than the final background. But it does make it a lot easier to not have to worry about perspective, and also certain particular landmarks, like particular special buildings, like Larkspur's Church. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Import, Image, and I'm going to locate. And I have it under layouts. So layouts are just backgrounds that you see in the final production. So you have two stages of environment, or tend to be two stages in environment design. One of them is environment concepts, where it's just what could it look like. And then you have your layouts, which is what you actually see in the final production. So she sent it to me as a PSD, which is exactly what I wanted. So sometimes I'll need to use the individual layers. In this particular shot, I probably don't need to worry about the layers, but it's nice that they're there because sometimes you just never know. So I'm going to open it, and I'm just going to say single layer because I don't really need this right now to. I'm not going to have the character interact with any elements where I need them to go within the different layers, so they can just be flat. But again, still nice to have them. I always recommend to try and have your individual layers when you're making a project, and try not to merge everything, because you just never know. You may want to move something later. Your client might say, oh, this looks good, but could you move this piece of debris over? And if it's all combined to one layer, you're like, no. No, you can't. But for now, I only need this to be a single layer, so I'm going to combine it as a single layer, keep its original bitmap, and I'm going to hit OK. I just want a single layer, and there is no transparency, so this isn't really going to do anything. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so it's a little larger, which is fine. It's absolutely fine that it's larger. Larger is okay. Smaller, you want to try to avoid, because smaller, if you expand it, unless your background is a vector, then you might run into pixelation issues. So bigger is totally okay. And also, I tend to recommend that the backgrounds be a little larger, or at least a little higher of a resolution. It doesn't have to be extreme unless you're doing like a crash zoom, but do want the backgrounds to be a little bit larger sometimes. It's just so you have the option to move the camera around a little bit. So I'm going to put this in. Let's make this go away. Okay. And let's see what it looks like. So she looks super gradiated. Like, she doesn't look like she's matching this light scheme at all. And that's actually just because we're in kind of like a play blast mode if you're used to working in 3D. But in Harmony, it's called OpenGL. The render view is actually what she'll look like in the end. So she has highlights and shadows that all have to do with this node view. And things look a little complicated. We'll explore this later. For now, we'll just import the backgrounds. I do need to update some of the composition because some of the nodes that I'm using were experimental, and I've been experimenting on other shots with different nodes. But we'll make that as its own video later. So we have this shot. I'm going to save it. And we can export. So I usually like to export it I have a folder that I keep all the shots in progress. So I'm just going to call this is shot 22. And I'm just going to call this new BG. Because I still need to update some of the composition. So I'll explore that later. So go to export, and then it said _30, I believe. So yeah, 22 and 30. So let's open 30. This is also why it's helpful to have all of your scenes numbered. Now I actually have been updating the animatic, and and it is going to change the number order. So when that time comes, I'm going to have to go through here and cry and update the numbers. But I haven't done that yet. So we'll just stick with the numbers as they are. Okay, and so this one's not as far along as the other shot is, but still uses the same background. So again, Amber's a 3D underlay, and then import images. And I'm just importing the same background again. Oops, I didn't mean to hit browse. Hit OK. Single layer. There we go. So she's a little harder to see right now because she's rough animation. But that's okay, because when I go to do ink and paint, you can turn on a light bulb and you can draw, and the background will be kind of pushed back. So I'm not worried about that at all. So export movie, and there you go, new background, and that's it. That's importing, at least into Harmony, importing new backgrounds.